Vladimir Putin is losing it right now because Ukraine has finally secured indisputable proof that North Korean fighters are actively fighting alongside Russian forces in the Kursk region.
Чи знаєте ви, де ви зараз?
지금 여기가 어딘지 알아?
Не знає. Ви перебуваєте в Україні.
넌 지금 우크라이나에 있어, 우크라이나.
Ви знали, що ви воюєте проти України?
우크라이나 상대로 싸우는 거 알고 있었지. 몰랐어?
Не знав.
For months, there have been rumors and allegations, supported by drone footage and evidence of dead North Korean soldiers on the battlefield. Still, both Russia and North Korea have repeatedly denied these claims, but last Saturday, January 11th, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky took to X and announced that they had captured 2 North Korean military personnel. Though wounded, the captured soldiers have been safely transported to Kyiv, where they are currently being interrogated by the security service of Ukraine. This marks a significant turning point, as these captives are the first living and breathing proof of North Korea's direct involvement in Putin's brutal war. What's even more remarkable is what the Ukrainians have uncovered from this capture, a ton of shocking information that sheds new light on how the North Koreans are being used in this war, the conditions they endure, and the betrayal they experience from their so-called allies. This evidence could change the way we see North Korea's role in the conflict and reveal the deeper complexities of Russia's desperation. Now, this isn't the first time Ukrainian forces have captured North Korean soldiers alive. Back in December, South Korea's intelligence agency reported that Ukraine had taken an injured North Korean soldier prisoner. He was believed to be the first North Korean prisoner of war since Pyongyang deployed forces to support Russia in the war. Unfortunately, the soldier sustained serious injuries and eventually died before providing any meaningful information to Ukraine's security service. A photo allegedly showing the soldier later began circulating on Telegram, further fueling speculation about North Korea's direct involvement in the conflict. But that incident marked a turning point. It became clear that capturing North Korean soldiers alive could yield invaluable intelligence about their operations, training, and overall involvement in the war. This realization drove Ukrainian military forces to adapt and expand their strategies to specifically target North Korean troops. You see, by October last year, Ukraine took some limited steps by incorporating the Korean language into its widely recognized I Want to Live project. For those unfamiliar, the I Want to Live project is a psychological operation launched by Ukraine in September 2022. Its primary aim is to persuade Russian soldiers to surrender by offering them a safe pathway to defect. The initiative operates through multiple channels, including a round-the-clock hotline, Telegram chatbots, and direct appeals through social media platforms. According to its official website, the project has already facilitated the surrender of more than 350 Russian troops. Hoping that it would work for North Koreans as well, the Ukrainian Military Intelligence Agency began releasing Korean-language video messages on platforms like YouTube and X. They also posted Korean-language text messages on Telegram, directly appealing to North Korean soldiers. The messages urged North Korean soldiers to surrender, arguing that they do not have to meaninglessly die on the land of another country. It also offered to provide food, shelter, and medical services for those who laid down their weapons. But before we dive into more details, do us a favor and drop a like on this video. It helps us reach more people like you and ensures that factual, unbiased information can stand up to the flood of Russian propaganda that fills the internet. This inclusion of North Korean soldiers added a new layer of complexity, because unlike their Russian counterparts, North Koreans are completely unfamiliar with modern communication tools and don't know their way around the internet. I'd be surprised if most of them even knew what the internet is. So clearly this language and technological barrier posed a significant challenge to reaching them. Recognizing this, Ukraine decided to tailor its approach specifically for North Koreans. This time, they decided to distribute physical leaflets in Korean. These were dropped across several areas on the front lines where North Korean troops were stationed. The leaflets contained straightforward instructions on how to surrender and emphasized the benefits of doing so. One line that stood out in particular was, "Surrender today and join South Korea tomorrow." This was a direct appeal to the dreams and cultural identity of these soldiers, because they know the sharp divide between their repressive regime and the freedoms and opportunities available in South Korea. For many, the idea of defecting to South Korea wasn't just an escape, it was a chance at a completely new life. But so far, we don't have a clear picture of how effective this leaflet campaign has been. But let's hope it manages to save more innocent North Koreans from being tossed into the meat grinder. And the reason I say innocent soldiers is a bit complicated. So I'll state my reasons, and it's up to you to decide if they are or if they aren't. So make sure to comment below. You see, as I mentioned earlier, the 2 captured North Korean soldiers are currently recovering from their injuries, which include multiple wounds to the jaw, a fractured leg, and a bandaged right hand. Despite these injuries, their conditions are not life-threatening. Both soldiers have been identified. One is a 20-year-old rifleman, and the other is a 26-year-old sniper. Before they got involved in this war, they belonged to the Reconnaissance General Bureau, the North Korean military's intelligence arm. Now, as you might expect, communication with these soldiers has been a challenge. Neither of them speaks Ukrainian, English, or Russian. To bridge this gap, Ukrainian authorities are working closely with interpreters fluent in Korean, provided in cooperation with South Korea's National Intelligence Service. During their initial interrogation, the North Korean soldiers revealed some shocking truths. One of the soldiers stated that they had no idea that they were signing up for war. He believed he was participating in a military exercise and only realized the truth after arriving in Russia.
Що вам казали ваші командири, коли відправляли на війну?
그러면 여기 지휘관들 모자는 뭐라고 그랬어? 누구랑 싸운다고 했어?
훈련을 실전처럼 해본다고 했어요.
Йому казали, що просто тренування.
This changes everything. Up until now, the assumption was that North Korean troops in Russia were there under Kim Jong-un's direct orders, trained to obey without question and ready to fight with unwavering loyalty. That's the narrative that made sense, right? After all, North Koreans are raised to see their leader as almost a god. They're taught to sacrifice anything for the regime, so of course they'd follow orders to fight in a foreign war. To put this into perspective, consider the story of Ryu Seong-hyun. Ryu used to be one of the countless North Korean soldiers living under Kim Jong-un's brutal and oppressive regime. He spent years serving under Kim's ideologies before he finally made a daring escape across the heavily fortified Korean demilitarized zone in 2019. Ryu shared that back then, life as a soldier was much more than traditional military duties. Much of his time was spent laboring at construction sites, and when he was not working construction, he'd stand guard outdoors in shivering conditions. When it came to food, all he ever had was mushy rice mixed with corn. Meat was an extraordinary luxury, something he described as a rare treat that felt like a holiday gift. Looking back, Ryu admitted that if he had been ordered to fight alongside the Russians, he would have agreed instantly. According to his logic, he hoped to get better meals than he was already having. And just like that, Ryu would have wound up in Ukraine. But now, thanks to these captured soldiers, we know that's not the whole story. It could very well be the case that all 11,000 soldiers were tricked and sent to Russia under the pretext of military training, only to find themselves thrown into the meat grinder. The captured soldiers confirmed that they arrived in Russia in November of last year. After their arrival, they underwent a mere week of military training under Russian military authorities. Then, they were sent straight to the front lines, equipped with outdated weapons and gear. Worse, they were given no clear understanding of their mission or the stakes of the conflict.
북한의 가족들이 없어? 있어?
Родина є. Вони знають, де ви зараз?
부모님은 지금 너 어디 있는지 알아?
А як довго він на лінії фронту?
그러면 전선에는 1월 3일부터만 있었던 거야? 1월 3일부터 있었고, 그러고 언제까지? 잡혔을 때까지?
1월 3일 날 나와서 옆에 동료들이 죽는 것을 보고 거기 난강원에 숨어 있다가 5일 날 부상당하고 그다음에
3 числа був наступ. Бачив, що його солдати вмирають. Сховався у бліндажі. 5 числа його знайшли. Така історія.
To make things even more heartbreaking, here's a different incident that truly highlights the human cost of this war, especially for the North Korean soldiers. So when Ukrainian forces search for fallen enemies, it's typically to recover weapons, ammunition, identification, or tactical information. But this time, while examining the body of a North Korean soldier killed in Russia's Kursk region, they found something profoundly different: a crumpled, handwritten note in Korean. The note, dated December 9th, appeared to be personal and was likely either a draft or an undelivered message. It read, "Dear Song Ji Myung, my closest comrade in arms, I am celebrating your birthday here on Russian land, far away from our beloved Chosun or homeland, and without the embrace of your affectionate father and mother. I sincerely wish you good health and a happy birthday." This short letter, written in the midst of chaos and violence, offers a rare glimpse into the lives of these soldiers. It's a powerful reminder that even in war, the individuals on both sides are human beings with emotions, bonds, and a longing for home. Imagine yourself in their shoes for just a moment. You're young, clueless, enrolled in the military, but still working in a random construction site in North Korea. Then one day, everything changes. You're handed a rifle, given a few rushed orders, and shipped off to a war you didn't sign up for. A war that isn't about protecting your home, your family, or your future. A war where you're a pawn in someone else's game. First, they're lied to by their own supreme leader, Kim Jong-un. And then they arrive in Russia, where the front lines conditions are horrifying. These soldiers barely know where they are. They don't speak Russian. Their training is less than a week. Their weapons are old and outdated. And lastly, they are ordered to move forward and not stop until they die. Here's one more thing. These North Koreans are stuck in a no-win scenario. If they advance toward Ukrainian forces, they're cut down by precision strikes, drones, or artillery. If they hesitate or try to retreat, their own supposed allies, the Russians, turn on them. Reports of Russian forces executing deserters or even killing their own with suicide drones are far too common. This is where you realize that these North Koreans are victims who've been deceived by a system that sees them as nothing more than cannon fodder. They're sent into this nightmare unprepared, unequipped, and uninformed, fighting for people who don't care if they live or die. The captured soldier also revealed that within hours of deployment, he had already witnessed several of his friends and comrades die on the battlefield. This statement confirmed what Ukrainian intelligence had already suspected. North Korean troops fighting alongside Russia have suffered significant losses in combat. In fact, South Korean lawmakers recently cited information from Seoul's spy agency and revealed that so far, approximately 300 North Korean soldiers have been killed and another 2,700 severely injured. These are staggering losses, especially when you consider that it's only been a few weeks since these troops were deployed. If this pace continues, the remaining 75% of North Korean forces are likely to meet the same grim fate. While South Korean intelligence provides one set of numbers, other sources paint an even bleaker picture. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has claimed that North Korean casualties, including both wounded and killed, have reached 4,000. Meanwhile, John F. Kirby, the White House National Security Council spokesman, quoted a lower death toll but still confirmed that over 1,000 North Koreans had been killed or injured in December alone. These numbers might vary, but they all point to one undeniable fact. The North Korean troops in Russia are being decimated at an unsustainable rate. But then it begs the question, why aren't we seeing more North Korean prisoners being captured, especially since thousands of them are reportedly fighting for Moscow? Let me warn you that the answer to this is a bit tragic. According to John Kirby, the White House National Security spokesman, many North Korean soldiers are choosing to take their own lives rather than surrender to Ukrainian forces. This is likely rooted in the fear of what would happen to their families back home if they were captured. You see, it's no secret that North Korea's dictatorship under Kim Jong-un is notorious for its cruelty and control. Under Kim's brutal regime, the concept of collective punishment is deeply ingrained. So if a soldier is captured or defected, their entire family, possibly even extending to 3 generations, could be sent to labor camps or executed. The regime also uses a guilt by association policy, punishing families for the perceived failings of one member. Soldiers are conditioned from a young age to believe that loyalty to the regime is more important than their own lives or those of their loved ones. So they must be very, very careful in every action they take. This fear of reprisal ensures that North Korean soldiers are trapped in a horrifying cycle. They can neither fight effectively nor retreat without dire consequences. But it's not just fear that's killing these soldiers, it's also their lack of preparation. Several reports indicate that North Korean troops are poorly trained, ill-equipped, and entirely unfamiliar with modern warfare. Many of them have never encountered a combat drone before, let alone been trained to counter one. Their training has been rushed and inadequate. When it comes to communication, they're reportedly given a crash course in basic Russian commands before being deployed. This language barrier has created chaos on the battlefield, leaving North Korean soldiers unable to communicate effectively with their Russian counterparts or follow crucial instructions. One Ukrainian unit even noted that the North Korean soldiers wore uniforms and gear that looked noticeably different from those of the Russians. They also reported that the North Koreans were using outdated tactics that go back nearly 70 years to the Korean War of the 1950s. Back then, wars relied on overwhelming the enemy with mass infantry charges, static trench warfare, and relentless bombardments. These tactics, rooted in brute force and sheer numbers, are completely out of place in modern warfare. It's no surprise that these methods have failed miserably against Ukraine's highly adaptive, technology-driven strategies. In the decades since the Korean War, warfare has undergone a seismic shift. Technology now dominates the battlefield. Massive troop deployments have given way to smaller, highly mobile units conducting hit-and-run attacks and precision strikes. Drones have become essential, providing real-time intelligence, spotting enemy positions, and guiding artillery with pinpoint accuracy. The concept of front lines has also changed. They're no longer fixed but constantly shifting, making large-scale assaults both difficult to execute and easy to dismantle. This evolution in warfare has left North Korean troops and even their Russian allies woefully unprepared. It's one of the main reasons Ukraine has managed to hold its ground and, in many cases, bring a supposed superpower like Russia to its knees. Moreover, a captured Russian soldier previously described the North Korean troops as not right in the head. According to him, they never smile, act harshly, and seem completely devoid of humanity. He observed that they shoot at anything that moves, drones, shadows, and even friendly forces, without pausing to assess the situation. This chaotic, reckless behavior not only undermines their effectiveness, but also puts their own allies at risk. The soldier also mentioned that the North Koreans actively avoid interacting with Russian troops, likely due to the language barrier. So due to these challenges and their weird mindset, North Koreans operate in groups. And eventually, this tight grouping became their death sentence. Ukrainian artillery and drone strikes have decimated these clusters, wiping out entire groups in a single strike. According to the captured Russian soldier, these small units often face massive casualties. Yet despite witnessing the deaths of their comrades, the surviving North Koreans continue advancing, firing whatever weapons they're handed, without any regard for strategy or their own survival. This unwavering persistence, almost robotic in nature, likely stems from the harsh conditioning they've undergone in North Korea. Added to this is the fear of what might happen to their families back home if they're seen as failing the regime. Also, it's hard not to wonder about the fate of the families of these two captured North Korean soldiers. That is, if they have any. When the interpreter asked one of the captured soldiers if he would like to return to North Korea, he paused and instead asked whether Ukrainians were good people. After the interpreter assured him that things were good in Ukraine, he expressed his desire to stay, saying he wanted to live there. However, when they asked the same question to the other captive, he was initially unresponsive. But when the interpreter asked again, using choson, the term North Koreans use for their country, he nodded, likely due to family, or maybe he is in fear that the Ukrainians will send him back to Russia. Still, no matter the case, experts have urged Zelensky to not send them back to the north, especially the one who expressed his wish to remain in Ukraine, because it's almost a guarantee that he would be executed upon arrival. The best option for him would be South Korea. On Sunday, President Zelensky stated that Ukraine was prepared to return Kim Jong-un's soldiers to North Korea if an exchange could be arranged for Ukrainian warriors held captive in Russia. He also added that for those North Korean soldiers who do not wish to return, alternative options might be available, specifically those who express a willingness to promote peace by sharing the truth about this war in Korea would be given that opportunity. But how do you think the Russians responded to the issue of captured North Korean soldiers exposing their involvement in the war? You'd think Russia would at least acknowledge the fact of North Koreans being present in Russia, right? But no, instead they came up with what they must have thought was a clever solution, a fake military ID. And not just any fake ID, but one claiming the North Korean soldier was a local from the Russian Republic of Tuva. It sounds ridiculous, right? That's because it is. This particular ID was issued under the name Antonin Aranchin, a real person from Tuva, born in 1998. On paper, it included details like his supposed birthplace, Tehran and Tuva, and his civilian profession as a tailor. But here's where things start to fall apart. The ID lacked a photo, a signature, and issuance dates, some of the very basic things an ID is meant to have. And if that wasn't bad enough, journalists dug deeper and found that while there is indeed a person named Antonin Aranchin in Tuva, his real life doesn't line up with the ID. For starters, Aranchin's actual birthplace is the village of Erzin, not Tehran. As for being a tailor, there's no record of that. In fact, in recent years, Aranchin worked in forestry and later as a grocery store security guard. He was even denied loans repeatedly because of low credit worthiness. So why Tuva? Why not some other region? Well, that's where things get a bit more calculated. Tuva is one of Russia's most ethnically distinct regions, with a predominantly Asiatic population. Many Tuvans have physical features similar to North Koreans, so on the surface this might seem like a plausible cover. Putin's plan, or whoever came up with this, likely banked on the fact that people would just assume these North Korean soldiers were local Tuvans. But this plan is full of potholes. First off, language. North Koreans speak Korean, not Russian or Ukrainian. Even if you try to disguise their appearance, they can't magically start speaking Russian overnight. And while Tuvan is a Turkic language with its own distinct identity, the majority of Tuvans are at least conversational in Russian due to decades of Soviet integration. So, unless the North Korean soldiers were suddenly fluent in Russian, which they're not, the plan falls apart as soon as they open their mouths. Another issue is cultural familiarity. Tuvans may look similar to North Koreans, but their lives and experiences are worlds apart. Tuvans are part of the Russian Federation. They've grown up with some degree of access to Russian culture, albeit from a marginalized position. North Koreans, on the other hand, have spent their lives under one of the most isolated regimes on Earth. Their behaviors, mannerisms, and even military tactics are completely different. It wouldn't take long for anyone to notice something was off. And let's not forget the practicalities of war. Ukrainian forces have been able to capture North Korean soldiers and recover evidence like this fake ID. But on the battlefield, these soldiers stand out for more reasons than just their poorly executed cover stories. They use outdated tactics, like the ones we mentioned earlier. On a different note, the use of Tuva itself reveals something deeper about how Russia views its own people. Tuva and similar regions are some of the poorest and most neglected. Tuva in particular has been in Russia's shadow for decades. It only became part of the Soviet Union in 1944, and its people have faced systemic discrimination and neglect ever since. The region has some of the worst socioeconomic indicators in Russia, including high unemployment and poor infrastructure. Yet when it comes to war, Tuva's sons are sent to die on the front lines, just like everyone else from Russia's marginalized communities. Soldiers from these minority regions are often sent to the front lines disproportionately compared to those from Moscow or St. Petersburg. Ultimately, by tying North Korean soldiers to Tuva, Putin's regime is not only trying to obscure their presence, but also leaning into a deeply entrenched system of ethnic and regional exploitation. Now let's circle back to what this means for Ukraine. One thing is for sure, Zelensky is going to use this opportunity to galvanize even more support from his allies. You might have noticed that Zelensky has consistently framed this war not just as a struggle for Ukraine's sovereignty, but as a global fight between democracy and authoritarianism. By exposing the lengths to which Russia will go, enlisting soldiers from one of the most oppressive regimes on the planet and attempting to cover it up, Zelensky strengthens his argument that this war is a direct challenge to the world order. This line of reasoning has already proven effective in securing support from NATO and the EU, and it will likely be a key talking point in upcoming meetings with allies. Similarly, South Korea has also expressed serious concerns about North Korea's growing military alliance with Russia, viewing it as a significant threat to both regional and international security. First, there's the direct military cooperation. North Korean soldiers fighting alongside Russian troops in Ukraine show that Pyongyang is willing to put boots on the ground for Moscow. This could set a dangerous precedent, suggesting that North Korea might seek similar support from Russia in future conflicts, particularly in the Korean Peninsula. Second, there's the exchange of military technology. South Korea is worried that now North Korea is gaining access to advanced Russian weapons systems, such as satellite technology, long-range artillery, drones, and missile technology. For a country already armed with nuclear weapons, this kind of support could escalate tensions in the region and make North Korea an even greater threat. In response to this, South Korea has been stepping up its diplomatic and military efforts. On the diplomatic front, South Korea has been working closely with its allies, particularly the United States, to address this issue at international forums like the United Nations. South Korean officials have repeatedly called for stricter sanctions on both Russia and North Korea and urged the global community to take these developments seriously. On the military front, we're yet to see some significant changes. This could likely include deploying advanced missile defense systems, conducting more joint military exercises with the US and Japan, and investing in next-generation technologies like drones and AI-driven defense systems. South Korea is also accelerating the development of its indigenous KF-21 Boramae fighter jets, aiming to strengthen its air superiority in case of future conflicts. For now, the fate of the two captured North Korean soldiers remains uncertain. Let's hope they spill out more valuable information that Ukraine could use. As for the remaining 6,000 to 7,000 North Korean soldiers still deployed in Russia, their future seems grim. With casualty rates already alarmingly high, it's only a matter of time before these troops face the same fate as the thousands who have already perished.